Hi Alvaro, I hope you're doing well. So what we had I've spoken to your mum and I said that I think we could do is maybe send a couple of um, lessons to you to practice your English because you've been doing so well with your English, and I didn't want to really stop doing anything because you showed some absolute remarkable improvement. So I didn't want to stop your lessons at all, but I don't want you to stop the football either, because that is something that you are good at and that you enjoy. So I thought it would be fun just to do a couple of lessons and give you some English lessons that you can actually watch and have a look at them when you've got time and when you are relaxed. Okay, so you can watch these anytime you want. So that's the fun of them all. Okay, so I think let's get started. I'm going to get going. So first of all, what I would like to do is I'm just going to share with you my desktop here. Let me just do that quickly. There we go. I think, yeah, there we go. So one of the things, there are a couple of things that you can do to improve your writing. And one of these things that you can do is, of course, to use the passive voice. Now, a lot of times, the passive voice is a little bit of a confused grammar, confusing part of grammar. Oh my goodness, it's even confusing for me to talk about it. But it is actually quite useful, and it's quite an important part of English grammar. So normally when we speak, when we do everyday conversations, all right, so let's say oopsie, everyday conversations, we will normally use the active voice. Okay, so that's what we'll use all the time. Okay, we'll use the active voice. That's what we do. So when you're talking to your friends, you're speaking to your mum, when you're talking to your teachers, you are going to be using the active voice. The passive voice is a little bit different. So we're going to go through the introduction. So don't worry if the introduction sounds absolutely terrible. Um, don't be too concerned about it. All right. So it's going to sound a little weird. Okay. So rest assured, it's not that bad. So the passive of an active tense is formed by putting the verb to be into the same tense as the active verb, okay, and adding the past participle of the active verb. Right. In other words, to be would be is, am, are, or was, were. Okay, and we're going to use the past participle of the active verb. Right. Instead of saying walk, we would say walked. Instead of talk, we would say talked. All right. So we use the past participle of the active verb. The subject of the active verb becomes what they call the agent of the passive verb. Now, the agent is very often not mentioned. And if it is mentioned, we normally would use the word by me, by John. All right. And it's normally placed at the end of a clause. So, before we go any further, let me quickly just do this part here. So when we've got a sentence, any sentence that we do is will have obviously an object or object. It'll have a verb and it'll have a subject. Oopsie, and I'm doing this all wrong. Subject plus verb plus object. There we go. So that's normal. That is what we would say. This is your active voice. Right? That's your everyday speaking. All right? It's going to be subject, verb, object. Now, when we change this, what we do then is we're saying that the object of the sentence or the subject of the sentence becomes the agent. So the agent is the person doing, performing the action. So for passive voice, it changes a little bit. Now it's going to be object plus verb. And if need be, if the subject is important, or the agent is important, or not mentioned, or doesn't need to be mentioned, then you can add that on. That's why I'm putting that in brackets. So that's the basics. All right. Active voice is a subject, a verb, and an object. Passive voice is an object, a verb, and the subject. All right. So for example, I've got a nice one here. Active one, my grandmother planted this tree. Now we take, so we've got subject, object, verb. Now we're going to swap it around for the passive. And we're going to say the object becomes the new subject. The verb starts with, goes into be. All right, remember we've got it there, goes into be, and we add the past participle. There it is. All right, was planted by my grandmother, and that's that part we said that when the agent is mentioned, it is normally preceded by. Okay, and it's normally at the end of the clause. So now it is the subject is at the end. The subject, or also called the agent. So when do we use it? Okay. I'm not going to worry about short answers at the moment, so we're going to go on to this one. So passive use. The passive is used first and foremost when the agent, in other words, the person who does the action, is unknown, unimportant, or obvious. All right. So, for example, Jane was shot. We don't know who shot her. Could have been anybody. All right. The church was built in 1815. It doesn't really matter who built it. All right. It's unimportant. All right. We know it was a builder or an architect. Okay. We're not going to mention all the builders. Okay. So it's not important. He has been arrested. Okay. Obviously, that would have been, excuse me. Obviously, that would have been the police. Could not have been the Navy, could not have been anybody else but the police. Okay, they're the only ones with the power to arrest somebody. All right, so either unknown, unimportant, or obvious. Second use is to be more polite or more formal. Okay, so instead of saying, you haven't cleaned the car, I could just say, the car hasn't been cleaned. We know it's you. We know you got the, if mum comes to you, sorry, I've got something in my throat here. If mum comes to you and she says, oh, you haven't cleaned the car. But she could have just said, the car hasn't been cleaned. She's given the instruction to you. It's obvious. So she doesn't have to say the car hasn't been cleaned by you. Okay, because the instruction was for you. Okay. Next one, the action is more important. So when what happened was actually more important than the processes, the instructions, the events, reports, whatever. When the action is more important, we use the passive voice. So 30 people were killed in the earthquake. Okay. That part is really important. Instead of saying the earthquake killed 30 people, it's really really important to know that that's the action is more important. Or if we really want to, we can use it to emphasize the agent. The new library will be opened not by anybody, by the Queen. Well, nowadays it will be opened by the King. So if we want to emphasize the agent. So let's go quickly, and we're going to have a quick squizzy here at the agent. Okay. Now, to say who did the action that we are talking about. Okay, so we're referring to the agent. Okay, and we use the preposition by. It can either be a name, by Peter, a noun, by the teacher, a pronoun by him at the end of a sentence. We usually only refer to the agent when it gives us important information. Okay? Which otherwise, if it's not there, the sentence doesn't make sense. If I'm in a hotel, for example, and I'm phoning somebody and they're busy cleaning the room, I'm going to say, my room is being cleaned. Sorry for the noise, my room is being cleaned. I don't need to say by whom. We all know who's cleaning my room. It's housekeeping. They're busy cleaning my room. That's not important. But if my room is being cleaned by a noisy person, a noisy maid, that kind of makes important, that's kind of important to note. Or a singing maid. My room's being cleaned by a singing maid. All right, she's singing while she's cleaning. So that's important information that we want to add. Now, we don't mention the agent in the following instances. First of all, if we don't know who has done it. All right? If you're saying that your car was stolen last night or something was stolen last night, you will not know who it was, unless you know who it is. But normally we won't know who it was. All right, that comes later. Second one, if we are not interested in who has done what, we are talking about if we're not really not interested about that, or it's not important. Okay, he has been taken to the hospital. It doesn't really matter who took him to the hospital. The fact is, he's in hospital. That's the important part. Third one, if it's easy to understand who did something without it being mentioned. All right. Again, like we said before, the murderer was arrested last night. There's only one group of people that would be able to arrest somebody, and that's the police. So it is kind of obvious. So we don't need to mention it. The same with a jewelry store was robbed. It's already been robbed. We know it's a thief. You don't have to say that. It's not going to be we don't know if it's the owner, but it's going to be a thief. Okay, so it's not worth mentioning. All right. Or if the subject of the active voice is something like somebody, people, they, you, etc. All right. Instead of saying someone broke the window, with the passive voice, the window was broken by someone. Okay, we don't mention it. We don't mention the agent or the subject in this case, subject of the active voice. So we don't mention it. All right, it's not needed. It's not necessary. All right, so let's carry on. We're going to finish off now. Let's talk about going from the active to the passive. All right, couple of things. First of all, first thing that we need to remember, the object of the active voice becomes the subject of the passive voice. Remember that one, it swaps around. Okay, so let me quickly grab, I've got one here that I'm going to show you quickly. There we go, there's the image I want to show you. All right, so what happens? The subject becomes the object becomes the subject. All right, so remember that. So the object of the active voice becomes the subject. Number two, we change the main verb of the active voice into the passive voice. All right, the tense remains unchanged. If we're in the past tense, it remains past tense. If it's in the future tense, it will remain future. All right, we do not change that tense. It stays there. All right, that does not change at all. Number three, the subject of the active voice becomes what we then call the agent, all right, or the object of the passive voice. It is placed after the past participle and is preceded by the word or the preposition by. Now, as I can see it here, Agatha Christie wrote this book. So we take this book, that is the object, it now becomes a subject for the passive voice. The book, we're now going to go into the verb to be, and it's a past, written in the past tense, so we're going to have to use the past tense of to be, which is was. Written is the past participle of wrote. Write, wrote, written. All right. And then because we want to mention who wrote the book, it's important to mention that. We're going to say by Agatha Christie. And there's just another diagram of how everything changes around. So remember, it's only the subject and the objects that change around. The rest of it stays the same. All right. The verbs are still in the middle. Any time complement or time phrases that we use are still going to be at the end. That's not going to change. Now, there are two things that we could use. So we've got either by or we've got with. Now, quite simply, by, if we use by with the agent, it is normally a person. By whom? Right? It refers to who did the action. All right? So it can be a person by Mr. Black, John, him, her, they, them, whatever. All right? So it's a person. When we use with, we're now talking about an instrument. All right? With a key. With eggs, cheese and peppers in the next sentence. This is the material that was used. So it's the instrument, object, or material that was used to do complete the action. So that's the passive voice. Now, passive voice is so nice to use in your writing. We don't use it all the time. Okay? Otherwise, people are going to start thinking we're weird. So we don't use it all the time, but we do use it because it's a nice way to put emphasis on the correct place. So it's a good way to really bring down, or to really emphasize your writing. So the last thing that I want to share with you tonight is what we call double object verbs. All right. Now, sometimes we will have verb with two objects, especially when we give somebody something. Now, we can convert that in one or two ways. The first way that we can convert that is by making the indirect subject the subject of the passive voice. Okay? Or, if you want to, we can use it by making the direct object the subject of the passive voice. So either one of them we can use. We can either use it in direct or the indirect object. For example, Rick gave me this book. Okay? Me is the indirect object. This book is the direct object. So if we follow A, so we're going to start off with the indirect object is now going to become the subject. We can say, I was given this book by Rick. And if we want to use the direct subject, we can use, this book was given to me by Rick. So either way, both of them are correct, especially when you have two objects in a sentence. So some of the verbs that can take two objects are give, tell, send, show, bring, write, offer, pay, etc. There's a lot of them. So you can decide which one you would like to use, either A or B. If the indirect object, however, is alone after the verb, it needs the preposition to. All right? So we're not going to say, this book was given me by Rick. It was given to me. And if the indirect object of the past active voice is a personal pronoun, like, for example, I, you, he, she, it, etc., it needs to be changed. All right? It needs to change into the subject pronoun. The I becomes me, you becomes you, well, say it's you, he becomes him, we become us, all right? They become them. Right? So that changes ever so slightly. And that's it. That's the passive voice. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to send you a couple of examples or a couple of exercises that you could actually have a look at. Okay, so you can play around with them, see what you can do, which ones are difficult, and of course, if you've got any questions, I'm just an email away or a WhatsApp away. Okay, or you can call me. I don't mind. As long as it's not early in the morning for me. All right. So, but have fun. Enjoy the lesson, and I hope you have a really, really great time. So, good luck with your football or your soccer, and hopefully, I'll see you soon. Have a good time. Bye.